Hi, everyone. My name is Robert Pellicciati, and I'm the manager of Inclusive Assessment. If you joined this presentation, you signed for it, signed on, you want to hear about updates for the MCAS-Alt for the 2024 spring administration. I'm joined by Deborah Hand and Kevin Froten and some of our teacher consultants, which Deb will also introduce in a few minutes. I'm going to go on to the next slide, and Deborah Hand is going to tell you a little bit about today's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Rob. So we're ready to get started. This is all we have today to work on. If you came to the one yesterday, this is exactly the same. We're not doing anything different. This is a continuation. This update is for people who have completed the portfolio in the past. If you haven't, we already did 2 introductions, and those are recorded and in the site that Kevin put in the chat box. So this is what we've already done, and I want to let you know that these are available. They will be available shortly. The ELA writing and the science. So if you just need a refresher or you want to go to different parts of that, those are recorded and we will have them posted very soon. Access skills, if you're a teacher that works with students who use access skills, we have one session, and that's on October 16th. So if you haven't signed up, you can still sign up. And we did our last administrator's overview today. So if you have an administrator that didn't get to go, just remind them that we do have the recorded version available. So just a few reminders. And we love to tell you because then you will also remind your administrators. So your administrator needs to order the MCAS-Alt materials between January 2nd and the 12th. You need to tell them how many portfolios you're going to need, how many students you have in your classroom that are going to be taking the alternate assessment. And then if you get any new students and you don't think they got that number, please go and remind them that now I have 12 instead of 5. Just kidding. So binders will come in the week after February vacation. So a box with all your binders and all the materials come at that time. We ask all the administrators to open that shipment right away to make sure that they have everything they need, and they have to fill out a principal certification. That's not up to you to remind them of, but just know that the materials will be there. And if you need additional materials, that will be the time that they can order it. They need to schedule a pickup for those binders by Thursday, March 28th. Okay. Oh, excuse me. That's when they will be shipped. My fault. I keep forgetting that Friday is Good Friday. So Thursday, March 28th is when they are due. So they need to be shipped out by then. And the results, which sounds like such a long way away, but the results will come back in mid-June. They come back typically around the 10th, and it's when you are still in school. So make sure to ask for them. We have revised the educator's manual, and it's slimmed down. It's just the facts, as we were just talking about amongst ourselves. It's we wanted to make sure that it was clear and that we took out a lot of the extraneous material. So please take a look at that. And as you know, all the information that we're going to talk about or that you need to put together your portfolio is in that educator's manual. We also redid some of the information in the resource guides, and we'll talk about how we renamed them in a moment. And math domains, you're going to love this. I know you are. So the math domains are going to be linked to lower grade levels, and Kevin's going to show us what that looks like. I also have a visual for you. And just a reminder, this year for high school, for the science and technology engineering, it's only introductory physics and biology available. So just a reminder, I'm sure you know that, but write it down in case you were thinking of doing something else. And Rob's going to go into an explanation of our new defined criteria for students that are eligible to participate in the alternate assessment. I know there's some information roaming around out there, so you're going to get it straight from the horse's mouth and just the facts. And with that goes the alternate assessment participation tools for your IEP teams. So I'm going to start with this. Most of you should know what this is. It looks very familiar, especially at the bottom with the high school. That's how we always knew how to spiral back from the high school. But now you're going to be able to spiral back even at the grades 3 through 8. You're still going to complete the skill survey for your student's grade and still going to select the most complex entry point that challenges your student. You're not going to automatically go to kindergarten because you think that's where your student is. You're always going to start at the more complex and work your way back. Okay, make sure that you're still challenging our students. We don't want it so that they have mastered it right away. We want to give them, raise that bar and make sure we're giving them something challenging. So Kevin's going to show you the forms and graphs online and what this looks like and how the color coding will help you here. But once you're in the program, how it's going to allow you to go to other domains, which it didn't before, except for high school. The other thing we're going to look at is where our educator materials are available and some other cool things that, Kevin, he's up to his game again one more time. So take it away, Kev.
Thank you, Deb. So as excuse me, as Deb mentioned, we'll pop over to forms and graphs in just a second here, and I'll show you kind of in real life how this interacts with your ability to select entry points in math to create that measurable outcome. So give me just one moment here and I'll switch over and we'll take a look. Okay, so here we are. Many of you are probably already using it already. It's been up and running for a couple weeks now, forms and graphs. Just a reminder, if you were using it last year, nothing carries over, including your user account. So as a new user this year, remember to go to registration page and create your account to get going this year. Before we sign in and take a look at the changes, I just want to point out this view education. We started doing this last year, this view education materials. So when you click this, that'll open up a new tab for you and all the fall training stuff. So this is where you can go to register we've got one left that you can register for if you want that access skills. And then that link that I put in the chat, all the materials, this download materials. So all the trainings that we're doing and these coming soons will turn into clickable links as these are made available, the recorded sessions. So very soon those will all flip over to being able to click on it to watch whatever training you are. But from everything we've done, from the update, access skills, the overview, competency, all those materials, that's a link. I'll put it again when I'm done in the chat if you joined after I entered it the first time. But this is where you can get all the slides and any related handouts. So let's dive on in. So remember, create an account if you haven't used it again this year. Just go to the registration page and give it the info it wants. But I'm going to sign on in. One subtle, it always bothered me, one subtle thing, it doesn't force you to go to my account every time. Once you've added students to your student list, it will bypass that and just take you right to your student list. So you don't have to do one more click. But just a reminder, in that My Account, if you skip over it the first time, whatever you enter here, it will populate on pretty much the MCAS-Alt cover sheets, the portfolio cover sheets of all the demographic information that you put in. And don't forget down here, hiding at the bottom, I've been using this a lot, but anybody that you delete, any student, it doesn't really get deleted. It just hides down here. So if you accidentally delete a student at the end of the year, just remember you can come back and restore them and it's all like you never did it. And that all lives on that My Account page. But let's take a look at a student. So let's dive into this sample for a grade 7 student. And I'm going to go into and the other place. So this educator's training materials, that's that same link that I showed you from the login screen. It just opens the materials that we just looked at with all the registration information and the manuals and everything else. You can get that right from the table of contents. But where most of you go right away is to the Strand cover sheets. And here you see I've got a math ratio proportional relationship strand hanging out here. I'm going to click go to cover sheet. And maybe some of you didn't run into this, but I know it was frustrating for a handful last year with the skill survey, because what it's going to tell me is I didn't complete a skill survey. I do have a skill survey in here, but remember the key with the skill survey, and I can go right to my survey list. And you'll notice I did it, but every single line needs to have a selection. If there's 12 skills, every single one of them needs to have a choice made for it in order to complete the skill survey and unlock that strand cover sheet. So this year, when I go back to it, notice all of these are green, but 3 isn't. So the one line that I skipped when I did this, it'll point it out to you. Because it will not unlock that strand cover sheet until you make a selection. In this case, there's 11 different skills. So all 11 need to have a choice. So it'll sort of nudge you in the area of what you might have missed. So once you give it a selection, you can run that check on this page. If you just save the page, it'll run the check, and notice 3 turn green. They're all green. Now I know I have a completed skill survey. So that caught some people last year. They're like, I know I did the skill survey, but you'd look at it with them and just one of them would just have a line that didn't have a selection. So it's easy to do. They're all just radio buttons. But now you'll be able to kind of look at it quickly and see that one isn't green, and you know that's the one that needs a selection. So let's pop back to our strands list and start to look at how that resource guide is implemented here. So everything else is pretty much the same up top. So it's carrying over everything it knows. Catches people sometimes with this drop down for learning standard. Once you select the standard, remember big red button. You want get LS text until you see the actual learning standard text. If I left this page and come back, it's going to say select again, and whatever I had in that drop down is going to be gone. But once you click it, it'll pull in that learning standard text and lock in that choice that I made. So if it's constantly resetting it, you're likely not clicking the big red button. But the function of the measurable outcome remains the same. It's a text box, and we have another big red button called find entry points. Also access skills are included here. So when I click this, remember it's a grade 7 student, so it's going to start me at grade 7 tab here at the top. And we're in ratio and proportional relationships, and here's all the related grade 7 entry points. Last year and previous years, the lowest this would have gone was grade 6, because that was the lowest point for ratios and proportional relationships. But notice this year we've got 3, 4, and 5. Sometimes it'll go all the way down to pre-K. It just depends on whatever the lowest grade level of the related domain is. But watch what happens when I go from grade 6 to grade 5. Now it flips. Now I'm in number and operations fractions. So this continuum, and from all the way to grade 3 to high school, and notice if I do high school, it'll flip again. Now I'm in functions. But these 3 domains are vetted to be a linear progression from low to high. Same rules apply. Any skill that you see across all of these tabs is appropriate to use when you're creating a measurable outcome for this grade 7 student. In this case, doing a ratios and proportional relationships strand. So you can go all the way down to grade 4 and get at those lower related entry points. But same concept. You'll select the skill. It'll check off entry point for you, put in the resource guide number, and then do the root of that measurable outcome for you with that XX accuracy and XX independence. So built in here, you don't have to remember what's related to what. It'll just, whatever it presents to you, that's the progression that you have to work with across those different grade tabs at the top there. One other change that I've put in for this year has to do with the bar and line graphs, which I know has been a frustrating point for some folks, particularly in reading. But the actual entry doesn't look any different. But the subtle change that was made this year is previously it was 175 characters is where it would start to cut you off and truncate. I bumped that up to 200. It'll actually stop you from typing at 200 characters now. It'll just be a hard stop. You won't be able to enter anything more. But let's just put in some basic information just so you can see. I'm not going to type, but you'll see it counts down from 200. So what it will do when you actually generate the graph, we've reworked the top of the graph. We got rid of the full learning standard text and just put in the number and kind of shimmied everything up to the top, which gave us a lot more room down at the bottom. There's about 4 new rows of available space that are in here. It's still a locked space, so it depends on how the text breaks. If you use a lot of really long words, you might fill it up a little faster, but with 25 more characters and about 4 more lines, you should find that you're getting cut off far less often. So you can probably in reading be able to shove those titles in there now and not have to either handwrite them in or get creative on how you put titles. It should be enough space to sneak them in there. Other tips on that is we get the question a lot, do you have to put the student name, which a lot of people do. They treat it almost like a little mini measurable outcome, and you don't. You just have to say what the student did and how they did it. So no need to put the full student name that time. You can just describe what was done and how they did it. So don't go crazy trying to create full paragraphs in there. It's a brief description. So just get right to what did they do and how did they do it. So those are kind of the tweaks for this year. The math branching across down to lower domains is the big one. There's a few other tweaks in here, but those are the new and notable that are worth pointing out. So if you haven't yet, feel free to create your account and get going. It's up and available for you. So now I will hand it back to Deb and Rob and switch back over to the PowerPoint.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. And I'm sad we're not in person because that would have been a standing ovation because I know how frustrating it was when you get down to the end and it's like, what can I abbreviate to get in that brief description? So that's awesome, Kev. Appreciate that. So the next part is just some reminders. We had changed the name, I think the year before, from teacher scribe work sample because people were confusing the scribing in writing and not really understanding what we were doing. And so we changed the name to teacher documented work sample because that's exactly what we were doing, was documenting what the student was doing. And so it's just the same function, different name. And you'll notice if you've looked at the resource guides online, they just have a new title. Nothing has changed as far as its function, but they're alternate academic achievement standards based on the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks. They have always been, it's just that we didn't title it like that, but we want to make sure that you're aware that these are alternate academic achievement standards for students eligible to participate in the MCAS-Alt. And for those of you who do appeals, sometimes, you'll put an appeal in, your administrator will come and say, should we appeal this? And you put it in and then you never hear anything again. I just wanted to let you know that we do physically snail mail the results to your school in July. So you might want to check with your administrator to see what that is. So the next part that I'm going to turn over to Rob, I want you to just listen to what he's saying and know that this is not on your shoulders to complete everything. So you are to absorb the information, understand it, and Rob will explain it fully.
Well, thanks, Deb. Yeah, I will certainly go through the process of talking about appropriate designation of students for the MCAS-Alt. So, as we're aware, only students who are truly eligible for an alternate assessment based on alternate achievement standards should take the alternate assessment. And for the past several years, we've had some ways to designate these students, guidelines we use a decision tree. However, the federal government has really suggested to states, when I say suggested, it's more required states to come up with what we call a definition for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities. States are required to do that for any student that's going to be assessed on alternate achievement standards. And just a quick reminder that all students have to be assessed for required tests for their grades, whether they're student with disability or not. MCAS testing is Massachusetts response to the federal testing requirement. So it's not a question of whether they participate, but how. And so we've had testing without accommodations. We've also had alternate assessment. So let's look at the participation guidelines, the somewhat new guidelines that we developed this year. So we no longer have the decision tree. What we do is we have a basic question that you would want to ask, or teams would ask at that time, is, does my student who has significant challenges, do they meet the definition of a student with the most significant cognitive disability? If they meet this definition, then they can be considered for alternate assessment. But if they do not meet the definition, they are not eligible. Again, we wanted to create a definition as we were required to do so. And this definition is just a definition for eligibility for the alternate assessment. For the alternate assessment, it is not for any other purpose other than the federal government requiring us to do that for alternate assessments. Again, if they don't meet that definition, then they're required to take the standard test with or without accommodations. And if you have questions about accessibility features and accommodations, the MCAS Accessibility Manual and Accommodation Guide includes a list of accommodations. We also have guidance on how to select accommodations, accessibility features. We also have several resources about giving students practice tests with accessibility features and accommodations of the standard test. And then the main goal of all of this is to ensure that only students who are truly appropriate for alternate assessments are taking that alternate assessment. So what they determined is that if a student is taking the alternate assessment, as we all know, these students' potential graduation is affected by it, because you know that if a student takes the alternate assessment in high school, they cannot earn their diploma. So teams are really responsible for providing this information to parents, the team meeting, discussing this and going through the process. To help concretize this process, to help provide you with some tools to make this decision, perhaps less guesswork, perhaps less discretionary at your team meetings. We've come up with 4 points, and we developed these points with various stakeholders, with throughout the state, a legal office, and we looked at this and we said, okay, what would a definition be for students with the most significant cognitive disability based on the federal requirement? So the first 3 parts, you should be quite familiar with. A student, they have to have a significant cognitive disability or delay in attaining age-level academic standards. So these students are struggling significantly in attaining age-level academic standards, even with support. Their education performance, they're not able to generalize from one setting to another. And these students require direct individualized instruction, substantial supports, and usually they have related services. So all of that shouldn't really be new. These are categories that teams should have been considering for the past several years. The one part that's new, and this is specifically required by the federal government, is that states have to have a definition that include assessment and identification of adaptive behavior. What does that mean? It means that evaluation information should indicate that only students who are performing 2 or more standard deviations below the mean on norm reference cognitive functioning and adaptive behavior assessments could be eligible. So while this may be quite specific, it is also specific for a reason, because teams should have to use this evaluation almost as a starting point to say, okay, do we have this information? And if we do, what does it look like? And then only those students who are truly performing at that level could be considered eligible for an alternate assessment. Again, this should really help teams take away any guesswork, if you will, any perhaps discretionary opinions people may have across different team meetings and across different schools and how they do this. And again, at the end of the time, we'll certainly answer questions about this definition. This definition is posted on our website, the ESSA website, and it's also included in the educator's manual. We move on to the next slide here. And at this point here, Deb is going to explain a little bit about this alternate assessment participation tool. And this tool should be used by teams to help go through and identify students if they're eligible.
Exactly. So the first thing I want to say is this is not on your shoulders to do anything with it other than add to it. So if you're at the IEP team meeting or before the meeting, whoever is in charge of writing your IEPs might ask you for some of this information. So we have broken down the criteria into those 4 parts, and you'll answer those separately. So you're not going to answer the cognitive evaluations and adaptive behavior. Someone else is going to get that information either from your 3-year, or maybe they'll take it to the school psychologist and they'll fill it out. But whoever is going to fill out your IEP most likely will fill this out, and then they will have access to the security portal and they will be uploading this document. This is only used if you think your student is eligible to participate. If you think they have a significant cognitive disability and you're not going to do this for every student. So don't think I've got 27 kids on my caseload, I've got to do this for every student. No, only the students that you think are truly significantly cognitively disabled, you're going to fill out this form, and you're going to have other people at your team meeting or prior to your team meeting able to fill it out. It can be from observations, it can be from formal results or assessments, it can be from informal. The only one that is specific is the cognitive and the adaptive ones. You can have the SLPs filling things in, whoever else you feel has information that would add to this. It doesn't have to be a book. It just has to answer the questions because you're going to answer yes or no. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and there's 2 points that I really didn't emphasize earlier that I really want to go back to emphasize. That one, we understand this is new. This is a transition year, so we don't expect anybody to go back and have an IEP team meeting that had an IEP team meeting already and designated a student for an MCAS-Alt. So we don't expect you to go back. So that's for one. We understand it's a transition year. We understand that everyone is busy, certainly work with their students. There's a lot going on in the school year. We're adjusting to it. But this definition and this companion tool, this alternate assessment participation tool, should really help you during this team meetings when you're making the decision. Our goal is to provide you that support, not necessarily just a paperwork to do, but support. It's also used to monitor districts to making sure that only students are appropriately placed in alternate assessments can take those alternate assessments. So we're making sure that, special education directors, principals are aware of this process as well. They understand that it's a significant decision to assign a student to an alternate assessment. One thing that's also a change, and I know Deb will go into this during your presentation as well, is if a student meets a definition for an alternate assessment based on alternate achievement standards, and they meet the global delays of cognitive delays and adaptive behavior delays, then those students are eligible in all areas, math, ELA, and science. It is no longer an ability to take a math standard MCAS test and an ELA alt, or vice versa. Now, I know that's a switch for a lot of individuals, a lot of teams, that because we've had that policy in place for several years, but going forward, if a student is eligible for an alt and the team makes a decision for an alt, they're going to take the alt in all categories. If they're not eligible, if we think they have some splinter skills in math, then they're not eligible. They need to take the standard MCAS test in math and English. Again, I know this is transition year, so if you made a team decision where a student's taking the alt in math and the standard MCAS test in ELA, we don't expect you to change it. But that's something going forward where we're going to really look at districts and provide that support. Would you like to add anything to that, Deb?
I just want to emphasize that this has nothing to do with a student's disability. People got a little hung up on that in other sessions we were in. This is strictly yes or no on the criteria. Doesn't matter what the diagnosis was or if there isn't a diagnosis. It's just answering these 4 questions based on data, evidence, observations, and then coming up with yes, they do. If it's 3 out of 4, then nope. They must have all 4 criteria. But this is not one more thing for you to do. You may be asked to add to it, but you are not expected to upload this or be in charge of it. This is not for you. You do not have access to the security portal. I think that covers it. Yes?
Yeah, and it should really help you working with the principal and administrator. If, for example, in a school, principal expects certain students to take the MCAS-Alt, you can explain this to the principal, the administrator. We've had meetings with administrators earlier about this, and they're aware of this process. And they say, well, this is what we have to do and upload this. These are the categories. So everyone is aware of the alternate achievement standards and assessment. And what does it really mean to assign a student to alternate achievement standard? It means that by doing this, we're saying is that the student is potentially not going to get their high school diploma, and they're only exposed to standards or exposed to a variety of standards that are significantly different from those students in the general education curriculum. We really want to ensure that, to the extent possible, students are exposed to the general education curriculum.
Great. And I did, before we go too far, I just want to remind folks that there is no opting out because of the way that the assessment, the alternate assessment is integrated into the daily instruction. It's different than if you come in and take a test where a student can stay home on that day and not come to the makeup. But because the assessment is built into your daily instruction, there is no opting out. So just a quick reminder on that. Okay, so we're going to move on to completing quality alternate assessments. And this is more about making sure you're aware of the resources available to you. So if you've been coming to any of the review sessions, which we will have again in January in person, yay, get to see everybody. But these completeness questions we always have there for you to look at. This is the best product we've come up with. And I think it all started in a hotel with Laura Hines and a lot of questions she was asking. How do we know? How do we know? So this is what we ended up with. Kevin has designed his scoring program around these questions. So these are vital for you to be able to answer. And if it's hard for you to be objective, I know when people look at my stuff, it's like, I know what I did and I know what I was thinking. If you can't be objective, let somebody else look at it and you ask the question and see if they come up with yes or no. A couple of hints, though, I just want to remind you, and many of you I know have been coming here year after year, and you used to see the top 5 reasons for incomplete. I just want to point out that putting the title into the data chart is really key. That would save so many people. Just put the title in each of those brief descriptions. And now that Kevin's given you room, that's just awesome. So just remember that. And the other thing is, and I'll share the page because it's on the next page, the math. If you are unsure of the concept, maybe you're unfamiliar, maybe you change grades, please check with somebody. We have a glossary. We updated it last year. It's in the, I saw it when Kevin was in the forms and graphs. I believe it's also in the material site, but use that or go to a teacher that's teaching in that grade and ask about it to make sure, because that's one that gets dinged a lot is that an entry point is chosen in math and the concept is not being taught. A different concept than the concept that's in the measurable outcome is being taught. So those are 2 tips I'm just going to give you for now, because I don't want you to have any incompletes. The next thing is our science topics and that instructional material. I'll show you a picture in a moment to remind you of that. But, you know, we've done the science, summer science program twice now, where we've taken a whole unit, a science unit. We did garbage again and worked with about 16 special educators and took that general ed unit and all the material that's available and broke it down and modified it from access skills to, you know, mid to high entry points. So it does take a little time. I'm not, but perhaps you could get together with other special ed teachers and maybe work together, have a PLC and do a professional development on it. It's worth the time. The kids will get so much more out of it, and you can think about how you can use it for cross-curriculum instruction. So one other thing I want to mention to all of you is that I was at a meeting for the special ed directors, and they had someone there that was talking about the National Center on Accessible Educational Material. And this is a resource for you. Your special ed directors do have to enroll your students that are eligible, but they need to have a disability, like a reading disability, vision, that kind of thing. You can get text and technology, and it's all available for free to our schools. So ask your special ed director about it. Might take a little time for when you download the text because it's in a different format, but if you work with your tech person, you can have text being read to the kids. So you can have like a separate place for the kids to go and listen and look at the text and have them being read to. So check that out. This is the science unit science units that are available. So when you click on the core idea and you get all those related topics, you also get the links to the units. So as you can see below the topics, there are these units when it has the different grade levels, and you can use the lower grade level if that's what you need. But there's some really great things. These are free. They usually ask you for your email. You don't have to pay for anything. Sometimes it looks a little like you're going to have to pay something, but you don't. So you sometimes have to weed through all the advertising of like, hey, you know, you want to get this next level. No, just go get the unit, put your email in, and you'll download it. Everything you need to do a unit is there, and that'll be, you don't have to worry about it. It's all completed for you. All the material that you need, including videos and what you can use and how long to make your classes. So, worth your time. The other thing is using supporting documentation. Now, I just want to be clear, this is all optional. You do not have to. Sometimes it's just very helpful when you're giving us something or explaining something to have the material that you are using. It's not going to be counted for evidence. It's just going to help us understand how this was done. So you can see one is the writing, like if they use the iPad, if you're using like Proloquo to Go or something like that, we can see what the student had to choose from. And the other one is a math rounding bingo game. So just things like that is helpful. But again, this is not in the evidence. It's not primary evidence. It's just supporting documentation. So I am going to put up our information as to how you can get to us. Anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Thanks, Deb. No, I appreciate it. I really appreciate giving you the information, and I really appreciate everyone paying attention or signing on to this presentation this morning. As Deb mentioned, really not that much is new substantially, and we have some good improvements Thanks to, Deb and Kevin and everyone else who worked on linking those math higher entry points or lower ones at lower grades. So that's a great tool for what I understand, a great enhancement. So kudos to you guys, and I hope the educators appreciate that. And I think I'd be remiss, and Deb would be remiss, if we didn't say that we know that everyone's got a lot to do. We know that alternate assessment, assessing our students, especially students with significant special needs, requires some work, requires you guys to put the effort in and collect the data, record the data. We fully acknowledge that, especially with everything's going on. But we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't believe that this actually provides some good data when done correctly for the students, for the parents, for people working with the student. And it does help inform instruction. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't believe it, but we certainly acknowledge that everyone has a lot to do, and we appreciate all that goes on in the school day, and that we want to make sure that as much as possible, we can support you in this process. And we also hope this new definition helps you work with teams and administration to determine what students are appropriate for the alternate assessment. Perhaps there are some students in your district where it's questionable whether they should take the alternate assessment. Hopefully this participation tool will help take that guesswork out of it and prevent perhaps less discretionary decisions regarding that alternate assessment participation. We hope this was helpful and informative. Feel free to let us know if there's any information that you'd like that we did not provide.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.